It's The World This Week. The World This Week in partnership with the Daily Beast. Correspondent Ananimsova will be joining us shortly. We're also in the company of Agnès Poirier, UK editor for French news magazine L'Express. How's your week been?
Jubilant.
Jubilant. Anna Navarro-Pedro's here, Paris correspondent for Visao. Are you experiencing monarchy envy as well?
No.
No, okay, that's a pretty firm no. France 24 senior correspondent Cyril Payen as well. How are you, sir?
I'm fine. How are you, François?
I'm okay. We are joined by Ananimsova, Daily Beast correspondent. How are things on your end?
Everything is great. Thank you.
All right, great to see you. You can, by the way, listen to The World This Week. Yes, you can listen to it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and other fine streaming services. 100 days of death and destruction, momentum swings, and resistance. To mark this moment, the same Ukrainian president who posted to social media on the night of February the 24th with his cabinet, striking the same pose in Kyiv this Friday.
Our team is here, the armed forces of Ukraine are here, and the most important, our people. The people of our state are here. We've been defending Ukraine for 100 days already. The victory will be ours. Glory to Ukraine. Glory to its heroes.
Cyril Payen, it's, masterful move public relations-wise to strike that same pose in that social media pose that he did on day one, Volodymyr Zelensky. Is it hiding what's been not a great week for Ukraine?
Oh, I don't think so. I wouldn't say so, because what is going on in the East is extremely worrisome for the people who are just maintaining the stance of having an aggression, which is the 100th day, as we said, from the Russian military. The Russian military are just taking over this Donbass areas. I'm just back from the borders of Donbass for my second trip, and there are lots of bombardment, shellings, and not much expectations from, I would say, from the people on the ground, despite what say Volodymyr Zelensky, which is very good, and I think it's a good thing that he's stating every day on the social medias or whatever means he have. But it's quite worrisome from the head of state, from Zelensky saying that 20% of the territory is actually in the hands of the Russians, and stating that already 5 million people have been fleeing the country, and 300 kilometers square are mined, and it underscore the huge and colossal losses on both sides. We are talking in Donbass of a ratio of 60 to 100 Ukrainian forces which are killed every day. So again, if we compare what we experienced 2 months ago with the Battle of Kyiv, which was not a victory from the special operation from Russia, but what we experience now in the East is really in terms of barbaric actions, of bombardments, of repeat of Mariupol, meaning that Severodonetsk is going to be zeroed from the ground of earth, because this is how is actually working the Russian military. It's quite very much worrisome that we have not such a response, I will say, from partners. And this is also, will be just an echo of what Ukrainians and every places of the country are asking us, French, what are you doing? Why are you just doing tangos? This is this thing they're using to talk about our president, Emmanuel Macron, still talking to Vladimir Putin and still having some talks about with the Ukraine president. They want people to take side. So this is a quite important and dramatic time now, indeed.
Ananimsova, is it better for the likes of Emmanuel Macron and Olaf Scholz to be speaking or not to be speaking with Vladimir Putin under the circumstances? Anna, can you hear us? All right, we seem to have lost.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now. Anna, is it better for Emmanuel Macron and Olaf Scholz and other leaders to be speaking to the Russian president or not?
Well, speaking is always good, I guess, but it's been 100 days of increasing disaster. We saw several cities grounded, bombarded. I was, in fact, in Luhansk region when you called me last time. I was in Severodonetsk, the epicenter of this war today. It's in Luhansk region where a beautiful developing town full of nice cafes, hotels. And today I hear that there are cleansing operations. The last time I heard about cleansing operations was during the war in Chechnya. And back then that was Russian police and Russian army going from street to street, district from district, sort of cleansing the area. And today Chechen commanders report to Ramzan Kadyrov about the success cleansing operations in Severodonetsk, which breaks hearts of many, many people in Ukraine. Divisions moving. First, the forces, then the private sort of militia called ЧВК, or private units, Chechen police. They're talking about cleansings, they're talking about filtration. I interviewed many people who have been through filtration camps. And there were filtration camps in Chechnya in 2000s during the war in Chechnya. So these are all terrible, horrible things. It's just inhuman. And what to talk about, what to ask, if this is a disaster, I wouldn't be happy. I wouldn't like to be in his chair 6 meters away from Vladimir Putin talking about it today. But I'm not a diplomat, I'm not the leader of the country, but probably talking is always better than silence.
Talking always better than silence. The question of how strong the resolve is, it's one we've been asking every Friday. Should point out we've had news that a French volunteer has been killed in Ukraine this Friday. Among those killed this week, a French journalist, Frédéric Leclerc-Imhoff, 34 years old. He was a reporter aboard an armored vehicle whose mission was to pick up civilians. What's your sense on this one, Agnès Poirier? Is public opinion as strong as it was back in February here in France? It turned staunchly behind Ukraine at that point.
I think it still is. It's interesting that, I mean, it's from the comfort of London and Paris. It's easier to say, yes, we need to keep talking to Vladimir Putin. It's another story the closer you get to Ukraine. And it's interesting that Europe, I don't think it's divided. I think democracy in Europe is noisy, and especially when you have 27 members in the same room. But on what matters, I think, on Ukraine, Europe is not divided at all. It looks more fractious than it is, and we saw it with the six package, the embargo, which we thought impossible a few weeks ago on most imports of Russian crude oil. Also, the is it 9 billion euros of aid package to Ukraine, but of course. Usually Europe is divided between north and south. Now it's between west and east, and you've got this new development that actually I think it's it's a good one. You've got the Baltics and the Nordics and the UK having this quite hawkish coalition, and with Poland, of course, on Ukraine, and wanting to supply with a lot of weapons. And I think it's a good thing that France and Germany and Italy are facing with those very active partners. But on the other hand, we also know that if President Macron and Chancellor Scholz are talking to Putin, it's also at the request of Volodymyr Zelensky. So probably everybody is in its role.
Everyone's in their role. Let me also ask about the fact that you have what has been a week of setbacks. You heard Ananimsova mentioning the first signs of cleansing of any dissidents. In other words, summary executions. But you also have the Ukrainians buoyed by the fact that the HIMARS are coming, the United States, to provide Ukraine with a small number of what's called high mobility artillery rocket systems, HIMARS. Each one mounted on a truck. It can carry a container with 6 rockets. These are medium range missile systems. They come in exchange of a promise.
The Ukrainians have given us assurances that they will not use these systems against targets on Russian territory. There is a strong trust bond between Ukraine and the United States, as well as with our allies and partners.
And Navarro Pedro?
Yes, let's hope no accident happens, because if it does, the war might change course. So far, there is a proxy war by the United States and somehow Europeans against Russia in Ukrainian territory. If some of the weapons given to Ukraine or delivered to Ukraine were to hit targets in Russia, we don't know how things could develop. It's certainly not well, because Putin is certainly a dictator who will not be mocked and provoked. So let's hope that will not finish that way. But we are at 100 days, and so many things have changed so far. In the war itself, we see now Russia trying to really canvassing Donbas region in a military way, ensuring that they can hold some strategic positions, hold all the land around a road that comes from Belgorod in Russia to Donbas, and which allows all the logistics going to the Russian troops, and so there are fightings there. But we do seem to see if there are sometimes there are more victories small victories on the Ukrainian side, but it seems that the Russian army is really going on its targets, and if that is true, then the summer will be the war will be on the south of Donbas. We don't know if Putin in Moscow, apparently they want to go all the way to Odessa. That would be quite another thing for Europeans and for the United States as well. But so this is on the war itself. Geopolitically, everything has changed, and it has just changed Europe. Now the divide is East and West. And it was on the way since, for 6 years now, since there was this, the 3C group that was created, in 2016, with all Eastern nations, with Poland becoming, the spearhead of U.S. military in Europe. And there is, lastly, but not the least, Europe now has confided its defense to NATO very clearly. All hopes for an European defense seem to be on hold right now. And so this changes also geopolitically all ambitions for this bloc of European Union.
Do these medium-range missiles, could they be a game changer of any kind?
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course, because it will mean this the new rules in the game. And it's extremely psychological too. This is why the very people in Ukraine, wherever we were in the past days, were asking, be on one side, be on our side. Don't talk to Putin, and we need to finish this war and not to be repeat of 2014, which is very much like the people are afraid of. And also are repeating, because also there is the thing in the West Ukraine, the western part of Ukraine, and Kiev. Kiev was amazing. When I was 2.5 months ago at the beginning of the war, it was martial law, strict curfew. Kiev now is just reviving. So this is the resistance sentiment, which we change to be resilience, which is absolutely great and extremely understandable. But my point is, for having been going with the fighters, the resistance fighters from the very civil society, not only soldiers in Bucha, Irpin, Ostomel to resist the invasion and the besieging of Kiev 2.5 months ago, the people are just coming back. And they don't want to see even uniform. They said, that's it, let's recover now. And the refugees do come back. And so we are in a very drôle de guerre, I would say in French, meaning that we are in a turning point, which is basically, according to what I understand to this war scene, is like the international community have to take sides.
Right.
This is actually what people are asking us.
And Ananimsova, the prospect of those Western weapons arriving that Cyril says could be a game changer. Well, we saw earlier this week Russian forces target railway depots in the west of Ukraine. So could we see a Ukraine that's split between areas that are rebuilding and areas that are at war, or will it be a total war?
Well, it's been a full-scale war for 100 days, and right now we don't see any signs that it slows down. We saw missile strikes, rocket strikes all over the map. If you look at the map of targets, the very small islands of Ukraine, which were not hit during this 100 days, was fire all over the country. And at this point, I would not predict anything because we could not see this happening, even when intels were telling us that the war was about to begin. There were very few of journalists on the ground who actually believed it was coming. So now to say that Russian forces are not going to attack Kiev again, I wouldn't say that. Ukraine is asking for more and more weapons, but at the same time, Ukraine is running out of fuel. In many regions of Ukraine, there is a lack of, for instance, that some shops are running out of salt and sugar. But as for food, many regions say we can do it, but we are having another disaster with the grain because the agricultural disaster is coming. There are millions of tons of grain that Ukraine has to ship out to fill up its stocks with new harvest. Otherwise, it's a complete collapse of the agricultural industry. So there are many points, and the groups that work, international groups that are now settled in Poland, in Romania, and they begin to channel this aid. But when we talk with humanitarian groups, with charities, with NGOs that are on the ground, trying to prevent from even a bigger humanitarian catastrophe, they say that security issues are the biggest issues right now. The transportation across the country, that is a big issue.
That's the biggest issue right now. The European Union, as Agnès Poirier was saying, putting the squeeze on Russian oil after a month of haggling. The bloc agreeing this week at a summit to cut imports by 90%. A big exemption carved out for the likes of holdout Hungary. The Hungarians, by the way, springing an 11th hour surprise when they insisted that the head of the Russian Orthodox Church be exempted from sanctions. That's, by the way, driving a wedge between like-minded Central European populists. Let's listen to Poland's Deputy Foreign Minister. He spoke to France 24's Catherine Nicholson.
Right now, we believe that Hungarian policy is detrimental to security of Europe, and we will continue our work to make everything that's at our disposal to change this flawed policy. This is a continuous process, and obviously this comes also to other countries that are also continuing their deals with Russia in gas market, for example.
So Agnès Poirier, as you say, we're now looking east-west at Europe, but there's trouble in in the old Mitteleuropa, as historians call it?
Well, there is actually, do you remember when Emmanuel Macron says we need to reform a few things, and the unanimous voting system in the EU, I mean, so Hungary gets an exemption, but if we change that, qualitative, what is it called?
Unanimous.
Yes.
If the unanimous rule is scrapped on
Exactly.
the unanimity rule.
We could actually proceed when it happens without the voice of Hungary, for instance. But it hasn't actually prevented from that package to eventually be adopted, and the aid to go to Ukraine. So far, so good. I think on what matters, the EU is holding strong together and showing unity over Ukraine. We'll see whether it works on the long term. And also the UK is playing a very interesting game, or I mean, it's not a game, but playing its cards. And Boris Johnson sees, obviously, the opportunity for him to appear extremely hawkish. And it is a fact that Britain has helped greatly Ukraine and supplied a lot of weapons. So there's this new alliance, and why not? Because,
Do you agree, Anna Navarro-Pedro, that despite Viktor Orban's stance, it's been a good week for the European Union?
Look, European, not as good as they might have expected in the beginning, but Europe has been a long process of negotiation, not very glamorous one, kind of going to the end of the night without sleep and getting a deal in the first hours of the morning. This is what happened again. Europe is quite flexible on its principles, as we have seen it in the past. And so what happened this week to reach this deal was not a deal for the 27, was a real deal for 23. Bulgaria, Hungary, Czech Republic and Slovakia, if I got them right, are out of the deal because they are heavily dependent on Russian oil. And there was this not only understanding from Brussels, from the other states in European Union, but also there was this there was an understanding, but also because it was absolutely necessary because we have the unanimous rule. I do plead that we do not change rules of European Union in order to fit one conjunctural situation. If we do, I think it will be the end of the European Union. We are fragile right now. Still, we are going through huge geopolitical changes, and European Union as a whole is not well seen, well perceived amongst European nations, the people on the street, and especially after all the COVID crisis. So if we go now changing the rules just to fit one situation, I think that in the end it will turn against European Union aims in the long term. So let's be cautious.
At the outset, Cyril Payen was talking about the Ukrainians being upset about the fact that Emmanuel Macron is talking a lot to Vladimir Putin. Well, one of the big topics he's talking about is global food security. And the next 100 days could turn critical for the developing world. The battlefield in this war is Europe's breadbasket. The UN World Food Programme usually gets half the grain that it ships from Russia and Ukraine. The waters of the Black Sea are mined. Russia is blockading Ukrainian ships. It's to the banks of the Black Sea that Senegal's president traveled this Friday, traveling to Sochi and the Russian president's resort there. Macky Sall, in his capacity as rotating president of the African Union. Sall, who, judging by the images we're about to show you, must have either taken a PCR test, unless the Kremlin's sanitary protocols have been lightened. No long table for the president of Senegal. The Senegalese president going to great pains to impress his continent's neutral status to his hosts.
You have followed the different votes at the United Nations, the position of Africa. Despite enormous pressure, Many countries have avoided condemning Russia in this situation. It is in the name of all these hopes that I have come to see you to ask you to understand that our countries, even if they are far from the theatre of action, they are victims on an economic level.
Cyril Payen, is this about food security, or is this about domestic public opinion in countries like Senegal? When you hear Macky Sall talk about, despite the enormous pressure, we've resisted condemning you at the United Nations in votes, what's your reaction?
Difficult to say, but for people like me, in France 24, who works a lot in West and Central Africa, we could say that it's less about food than diplomatic pressure. And well, it's a good thing that Macky Sall is doing this trip, but it's at the end of the day, history will tell. And history will tell, and the story will... well, it's very difficult to say, because it looks like, this shake hand with Vladimir Putin look like obsolete, with regards to what's happening in Ukraine, and with regards to what's happening in Mali, in the Central Republic of, African Republic, in Burkina Faso, in all this part of the world where there is huge pressure from the Russian. It's difficult in the Ukraine context to think that we are talking about food, but more about, let me be a bit skeptical about this trip.
I think many politicians in Africa are really afraid of what's going to come by the end of the year, in next year, because there isn't enough grain to feed everybody. Egypt is just... There are villages in Egypt that have bread brought on over by army trucks every day or every 2 days, I don't remember. The situation might get really, really, really tense and red hot in many countries. And of course, there is, as you said, some soft power to be taken from some public opinion, but and of course, if you could broker some deal in order to get grain to some of these countries in Africa specifically, it would be
in exchange for their neutrality, because
Exactly.
South America, Asia, there are a lot of continents and countries who have abstained from condemning Russia. And so perhaps they will try to trade their stance and neutrality against
because they will be on the
something
market
else.
to get oil that will be now free from deals in Europe. And it's missing oil worldwide. OPEC is very glad to have, and especially Saudi Arabia, to have oil prices up.
Yeah.
And the grain is going to miss. We are going to have problems eating in some parts of the world. And this is not a world war against Russia or Russia against the world. This is only West and Ukraine and Russia. The rest of the world is hands off.
That brings us back to sanctions. Ananimsova, you hear Ana Navarro Pedro talking about the Russian oil going out. I know that in terms of volume, it's 30% down. Can the Russians keep pumping out oil and natural gas without the know-how of the Western firms that help with logistics and parts? Their sanctions are, at what point do they bite? And when it comes to the hydrocarbon sector?
Well, Russia has been preparing for this so-called military operation in Ukraine for years, not only by putting a lot of pressure on independent journalists, on free media, but also by selling a lot of assets abroad and bringing back experts, specialists from all over the world, like Lukoil sold its assets and came home. And they have been establishing all sorts of relationships with Dubai, with China, to prepare for this. But I think they were not prepared for the scale of the crisis that Russia is facing now. And according to Russia's leading economists, Russia is going to have a serious economic crisis by the fall. We'll see if it happens. For now, the Kremlin is doing its best to keep the situation under control. And on the surface, at least, people say, when you speak with Russians in Moscow, St. Petersburg, that things look exactly the same as before February 24th.
All right, we'll have to see how it plays out. Other stories we're following for you this week. A record breaker who's gone platinum. We're talking about the Queen of England, appearing not once but twice on Thursday before adoring subjects at ceremonies to kick off Jubilee celebrations of her 70 years on the throne. Elizabeth II taking a pass, by the way, on Friday's Thanksgiving Mass that followed at St. Paul's Cathedral. The Queen absent, but royal lovers had plenty to see. They cheered the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge, gave a mixed reception to Prince William's brother Harry and his wife Meghan. And as for Her Gracious Majesty's Prime Minister, well, take a listen. Agnès Poirier, I don't remember at previous Jubilees the crowds booing Tony Blair or David Cameron.
No. Well, it's quite, she's known 14 Prime Minister, and I think he's probably quite unique in how undignified he is. So,
were you surprised to see that booing at St.
No,
Paul's?
I'm not surprised at all if you live in the UK.
I mean, I know London's not his stronghold anymore, but still.
No, I'm not surprised at all. There are...
Because this was a day that's supposed to not be about partisan politics.
Of course, but he's still in power, and he lied to Parliament. He lied to... he's a liar,
and he had parties.
Well, of course,
during COVID, while all
that's why I'm
British
saying he's
could
been
not even bury there
through his teeth, and he's still in Downing Street. So anyway, it's a democracy, and eventually the British will decide with the elections in 2 years' time, or the Tory party will decide in the next few weeks, perhaps.
Whether to throw him under the bus. Anna Navarre, Pedro, are you surprised at just how much coverage there has been of the Jubilee here in France?
No, but never surprised.
You're not surprised?
No, never, because you are so keen on having here in France covering news from crown heads in Europe, and England for you is the must, absolute must. I mean, you never got over ending monarchy in France. You never got over it. So no, it's... and I believe you might have a little soft spot for that very old lady, dignified, with her capacity of closing her eyes on the problems with her family, her favorite son, involved in in the Epstein scandal, and she's just like any granny here in France as well, or in Europe. So yeah.
People are fascinated by the longevity. Cyril Payen, in a previous life, you were a Bangkok correspondent. Later this summer, Queen Elizabeth is going to break Bhumibal's record for longevity on the throne.
Right. I'm not very sure I'm the one to be able to comment on this thing. I will try. And yes, indeed, and it was very much in Bangkok followed, of course, because it looks very much as a mirror thing, of what we could expect from a decaying dynasty there in Asia and the prolonging dynasty here in Europe. But yes, the Bhumibol died. There is new things happening. The only thing I will comment is that this kind of comments we can do about the EU, the UK monarchy, couldn't be done even now in Thailand, because there is strong laws about the crime of lèse-majesté. You have 500 people in jail for that, and it's getting increasing and so on. So this is, well, the difference, jokes apart. But it looks like, we have two kingdoms, but a lot of differences, and God save the Queen anyway.
Yeah, the best model for representative government is certainly a topic. Messages of congratulations from the four corners of the earth, including from Australia's new Prime Minister.
53 other nations in celebrating our common heritage, celebrating a life of service, fidelity, integrity, and humanity. As we light the beacon, we give thanks for Her Majesty's long reign and send her our very warmest congratulations on this magnificent milestone.
That's all great, but this was also the week where we learned that Anthony Albanese had appointed an assistant minister for the Republic. Does it mean Australians are getting ready to ditch Queen Elizabeth as their official head of state? They had a referendum back in 1999 that failed. And, you know, Ananimsova, one of the questions we've been asking about is empires. And I know that who's an imperialist? We heard the Russian president earlier when he was sitting with the Senegalese president saying our country's always been supported Africa in its battle against colonialism. And when you're looking at what this means and the world of 1926, when Britain was the biggest imperial power in the world, your thoughts on what this jubilee might mean in your native Russia?
It's very interesting when you think about Russia's far right, Russia's nationalists, and Russian imperialists. I was recently working on a story about Putin's problems with far right in Russia. Putin's nationalism is imperialist nationalism. He wants Russia to become an empire and stay an empire and grow as an empire, while Russia's far right, Russia's nationalists, they want real Russian Russia without all the other ethnic groups growing and taking over. So that's why many of them actually crossed the border and went to fight for Ukraine. And they are in their opposition to Putin. And there are also, as you know, dozens of ethnic groups in Russia who do not understand really what this Ruski Mir, the Russian world that Putin is building in Ukraine, is actually about. It's only for Russian ethnic Russians, or it's for everybody. And so now we see
it's a different kind of empire that he's trying to build, and not everyone agrees with it. Is what he's saying. So it must seem the optics of a Jubilee celebration must be something for those people to be seeing. Just one other point on this. Republican France was not to be left out of the Jubilee celebrations, as Anna rightly put it. This is Emmanuel Macron attending a lighting of the flame at the tomb of the unknown soldier at Paris' Arc de Triomphe, alongside the British ambassador. To think that just a few days earlier, the French and the British were playing political football. This over the Stade de France fiasco that saw Liverpool fans tear-gassed at the gates of the Champions League final, and that forcing the Interior Minister to temper his initial remarks.
It might have been an error of judgment to say, let's welcome Liverpool, but let's watch out because we're dealing with people who, I wouldn't say are dangerous, but at least have a certain history. Is that a difficult question to answer? It's clear. The notes from the security services say so, that the people of Liverpool pose public order problems. Not all its supporters, but a small part of them. And indeed, the security measures put in place implied an important police presence, and it probably is a mistake to have anticipated a hooliganism that in the end did not take place.
Agnès Poirier, Liverpool fans are furious because they say that they have, since the 1980s and those stadium disasters, they have let go of their hooligan past. It's interesting to see. One day, the French and the British are at each other's throats, and the next day, Emmanuel Macron's giving the Queen a horse for her birthday.
Well, I mean, the Queen is above, party politics, above football. Probably. Yes, the French Interior Minister couldn't have been further away from the truth when he attacked. I mean, it's easy. I mean, he just thinks his thinking is very old. He should have been briefed, because Liverpool is probably the one English club whose supporters are not hooligans. And there's a big difference between the supporters of big English clubs. They pay pay hundreds of euros for their tickets, and the supporters of the national team, where some of them are looking for trouble. So he's been so badly briefed on that. Also, it was the perfect storm what happened on Saturday, because there were failings everywhere, and not only the French police. But there was a very funny cartoon in French, Le Canard enchaîné, the satirical weekly, saying it was Gérald Darmanin,
the Interior Minister,
and let's forbid the English for the Olympic Games of 2024, just to resolve the problem.
All right, so despite the entente, there's sometimes still a bit of turbulence there. A messy divorce, 2 Hollywood stars, and a libel suit. The whole world watched Johnny Depp square off against Amber Heard in a Virginia courtroom. The jury this week finding fault with both, but whereas the verdict has Depp paying Heard $2 million, she has to pay him $17 million. In the court of public opinion, many more seem to side with the Pirates of the Caribbean star than with the leading lady in Aquaman. And whether you're Team Johnny or Team Amber, there's no ignoring the huge amounts of vitriol on social media, particularly on TikTok. Some, like New York Times critic Amanda Hess, warned of viewers shaping views in real times. This nihilistic circus is a potentially radicalizing event. Ana Navarro Pedro, I'm not asking you to opine on who's right and wrong between Amber Heard and Johnny Depp, but why all this online hate?
The trial was public. It was live on TV, on everywhere in the world, actually. Johnny Depp asked for it to make sure that people could take sides, could see, as he said it.
Is it because he's a man, or is it because he's more famous than she is?
I think it's both. And I think he had women, former women in his life, like his French wife, like his Kate Moss, his former girlfriend, going online saying that, going public, saying that he was not the man described by Amber Heard. So I think there was this kind of curiosity. I think it was the personality of Johnny Depp. And this can have consequences, because the court stated that she lied, talking about violence, domestic violence and abuse. If that is so, and she was believed for many years, this can have no sociological consequences, I believe, in situations of domestic violence, and how law is shaped and approved, and how women's complaint can be accepted or not. So this is one consequence probably to see in the future, but Johnny Depp is a huge star, and I believe that was the beginning of the main interest. But then, how many men in the future are going to say, if they're accused of domestic violence, well, look at Johnny Depp, he was wrongly accused as well. So,
this has you agree, Agnès Poirier, the potential to go beyond the gossip pages, to have consequences.
No, I don't really, because it's a unique case. I think the good thing about this case, which we all wanted to be spared the details of their private lives, really. But the good thing is, it was a case of defamation, so it means you cannot just spread. You need to back up your claims with evidence, and it is very good that the court actually passed judgment, because with the Me Too movement, which was on the whole extremely good, there was also so many cases of names given to on social networks, and the justice system not following up, because those women or those men didn't actually file suits. And there's such a thing as justice and going to court and showing evidence, and a jury to pass judgment. And this is how it should be done. Now, this thing is a circus that is completely unique. It reminds us of the O.J. Simpson trial, except now with social social networks. But
And the social networks are a big difference.
oh yes, they're horrid, obviously. But there's a court, and they passed judgment, and they decided that she defamed him, which. In his case, it's a question of, I mean, his career was completely ruined. Now he can resume some, some sort of work in Hollywood.
But you see, Spain, for instance, just recently has passed a law stating that women who complain about violence, sexual violence or abuse are, from the beginning, to be believed. Then there will be an inquiry. There will be justice will get involved and will have, hopefully, an impartial inquiry. But this law is on the basis that women are not lying, that they would have to be believed right from the beginning. And this, I was thinking of that when I say I think that this case can impair in the future
the presumption of innocence versus the presumption of truth, and that is an important, both important to put in the balance here. I want to thank you so much, Ana Navarro-Pedro. I want to thank as well Agnès Poirier, Cyril Payen, Ananimsova for joining us as well. Thank you for being with us here in The World This Week.